I want to turn to the topic of phonemic awareness. We're going to step through those 5 strands of reading. Phonemic awareness is the understanding that words are comprised of individual sounds. So it is the foundational skill of reading, and research shows that students need phonemic awareness skills to be successful in reading. So phonemic awareness comes from the name phoneme, which means sound. And do you have any idea how many sounds there are in English? There are 45 sounds in English. And those sounds are rearranged in various ways to comprise all of the words of English. And what's very interesting is a lot of times we have this myth that English is much more difficult than other languages. And so I went and I looked up how many sounds or phonemes are in some of the other languages. Interestingly, German also has 45. Spanish has 24. French has 37. And then I got really curious. I was like, what language has the fewest sounds? And there's a language in New Guinea that has only 11 sounds. However, there's a language in Botswana that has 107. Imagine the alphabet encoding this language. So English is really just in the middle, right? It's nothing unusual about it. Other languages are dealing with 45 sounds or even more. So when babies begin to babble, they actually babble all the sounds in all the languages, and they begin to narrow the sounds that they make to the language that's spoken around them. And then after they've narrowed those sounds to the language that they're hearing, they begin to combine those sounds into one-syllable words like ma and pa and me, cup. And soon they're combining those one-syllable words into short sentences, more juice, or into 2-syllable words, baby. And this almost happens magically, right? It just begins to appear until they're speaking full sentences. And when children learn to speak, though, it's really important to realize, what do they begin with? Sounds. They don't begin with words. And we're going to learn more about the neuroscience of reading, and it's fascinating. Babies are wired for the sounds of the language they're hearing. Then, when they are 4 or 5 years old and they're ready to learn to read, they're no longer focused on sounds developmentally, they're focused on words. They're acquiring vocabulary. What is that? They want to know the names of things. Many of these emerging readers or students who are beginning to learn to read are also missing speech sounds, right? There's 4 and 5-year-olds who can't say th or th or s, and so they're missing a few of the sounds. So we'll talk about how to fill in those sounds as well. So today we're going to talk about the building blocks of phonemic awareness, and there's a way that these skills fit together and that we can help students develop strong phonemic awareness skills. And that starts with what I call a kinesthetic awareness of sounds. So we're going to experience a lot of this content. So a kinesthetic awareness of sounds is feeling and understanding that our mouth forms in different shapes and ways to make different sounds. So I'm going to have you say this sound b. And by the way, when you're teaching phonemic awareness, you don't have to put the sounds up. It's not connecting it to the letters at all. This is just for you. But say the sound b with me. B. What are you doing when you say b? Feel what your mouth is doing. Your lips are pressing together. Go ahead and put your hand in front of your mouth as you say b. What do you feel? A little puff of air. And then how about this sound? P, p. Does it feel a lot like b? Why do they sound different? Go ahead and place your hand on your throat and say b and p. What do you notice? No vibration. Oh, no vibration for p. And b, it vibrates. Yeah, you're turning on your voice box for one and not for the other. These are a voiced and unvoiced pair. And you can just do this with kids. You can say, can you say b? What is your mouth doing? Kids find it fascinating. They can also look in the mirror, or you can have them watch you. So just becoming aware that when I make sounds, I move my mouth in different ways. I turn my voice box on and off. So it's also important that we discover voiced and unvoiced pairs. And I think this one is interesting. Let's say this sound. Okay, what are you doing to say? Yeah, yeah. So your teeth are kind of together, you form this kind of tunnel, and there's this air coming out. Let's compare it to this sound. Zzz. How are s and z different? Voiced and unvoiced pair, but your mouth is shaped in the same way. The next step of phonemic awareness is to blend two words into a compound word. So I'm going to say two words, and I want you to tell me what the new word is. Baseball. Baseball. The next word is teacup. All right? The next word is rainbow. All right, so that's what you can do, is you can give them two words and they blend them together into a new word. Then you can begin to segment the sounds of the words. So I'm going to segment a word and I want you to tell me the word. Ch-ik. Chick. All right, the next word is seal. Seal. All right, then we can blend consonants. So we can say two sounds and we can blend them together. So I'm going to say two sounds and I want you to tell me the new thing it says. K-ul. St. P-er. And many kids struggle, right, reading consonant blends, but we can take this as an isolated phonemic awareness skill, and when they can do this just with the auditory prompts, then they can apply it to reading more easily. Then we can begin to blend words with consonant blends. So we're going to do an activity where I want you to act out what I say. All right? So the next word is this. St-a-n-d. All right? And then k-ol-ap. And then j-a-m-p. And then go ahead and it. And you know what's fun, right, is we're practicing phonemic awareness and you're having fun. You guys are laughing and smiling. Imagine when you bring this to 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds into your classroom and you do a game like Hear It and Do It. So we can practice these skills through games, and that brings a lot of engagement and fun to learning. Once students are able to blend words, then it's time to practice segmenting. You can give them either a set of pictures or a set of objects, and you can ask them to segment the word. Who would like to try one? Go ahead.
Ow.
Cow. Okay. Go ahead.
Fish.
Fish.
Dog.
Dog. Yes, and so we can segment one-syllable words, and the students practice segmenting. This is the skill that they need for spelling. Then they can begin to identify the first sounds in words. What is the first sound in this word? What did you need to be able to do to identify the first sound? You actually needed to be able to segment the word first, right? So sometimes we skip those skills of blending and segmenting and jump first to identifying that initial sound. But if the student hasn't figured out that they can segment the word, then this skill is very difficult. So segmenting is a foundational skill to identifying the initial sound. Then we can identify the medial sound. What's the medial sound of this word? Ah. And then we can identify the final sounds as well. As in pen, yeah? Then we can begin to blend two-syllable words. So I'm going to say a word and segment it, and I want you to blend it. And I want you to notice two-syllable words are more difficult than one. Giraffe. Giraffe. All right, the next word is hedgehog. Hedgehog. The next word is pumpkin. Did you notice it's harder, right? Just in the same way that students find it more difficult to read longer words, it's also more difficult to blend them. So you need to practice these phonemic awareness skills in isolation without print, and that will help them to then apply it when they're reading. Then students will be ready to segment two-syllable words. And who would like to choose one of these words to segment? One of you? All right, go ahead.
Basket.
Good, and let's do one more. Someone else want to try? Go ahead. Very good. And this may seem very easy to some of you, and to some of you it may not. It's always interesting to me how many teachers and professional teachers come to me and go, wow, the segmenting and blending part was really difficult for me. So this is something to just keep in mind when you're in small groups and then to practice together. Then we can move on to 3- and 4-syllable words. So I will segment a 4-syllable word or a 3-syllable word, and then you blend it back together. The next word is k, a, m, p, u, t, er. Yes. W, a, t, er, m, a, l, a, n. All right. G, or, I, l, a. Gorilla. Are those harder? But this is why it's harder to read these longer words too. Then students began to segment 3- and 4-syllable words, and I'll need a volunteer. Who would like to do one of these? Go ahead.
I, R, O, W, A, V. Microwave.
Microwave. Was it even challenging to segment it? Yes, because we have to think through each of those sounds. Understanding that all of our words are made out of sounds and then being able to segment them into sounds is necessary for learning to read and to spell. Then we come to the skill of rhyming. And a lot of times, phonemic awareness begins with rhyming. And it is wonderful and important to read books and poems that rhyme to students, but rhyming is actually pretty complicated, isn't it? So if I say fat cat, and I ask the student if they rhyme, they actually have to identify the medial vowel a and the final consonant t, segment those apart and recognize that those go together. And then we often oversimplify rhyming because does hammer and manner rhyme? It depends on your definition of rhyme. And how about ludicrous lutefisk? Oh yes. Or Waffle House Awful Blouse. Like, we play all sorts of games, or we use words in all sorts of ways, and all these sounds that sound similar. So there are all sorts of different types of rhyme. If you look it up, there are many, many different categories of rhyme, and we tend to focus on just the simplest one, but it's actually a pretty complicated skill. And so I've also been told by some speech and language pathologists that some kids with auditory processing issues will struggle with rhyming potentially their whole lives. However, it does not stand in the way of them learning to read. So this is a great skill for appreciating books and appreciating the poetry and the word choices of authors, but it's not necessary to learning to read. And it's actually the most difficult of the phonemic awareness skills. So as students learn that all words are made of sounds, they also began to apply this. And so I had a parent write to me, and she said, my daughter called from upstairs and said, Mommy, I broke your hairbrush. And she was like, what? Why did you break my hairbrush? And she went, listen, a, b, sh, hairbrush, Mommy, I could break it. So what kids discover, right, is that all words are made of sounds, and that those sounds combine together to make new words. And that is a big aha moment for a young student or for a beginning reader. And in fact, this understanding that all words are comprised of individual sounds, this phonemic awareness skill, is something that is only demonstrated in the brains of people who know to read. So adults who are illiterate do not have the phonemic awareness skills, and they do not have this area of their brain developed. And we will dig deeper into that later tomorrow. But I think that's very fascinating. Also, many students who do not know that words are comprised of sounds guess really wildly when reading. Have you ever been reading with a child or someone who's struggling with reading, and they're going along, and all of a sudden they just guess out of the blue, and you're like, where on earth did that come from? Well, the reality is they think that reading is about whole words. They don't understand the connection to sounds and the way those sounds combine together to form words, which then connect to meaning. So phonemic awareness is the foundational skill. I also had a really interesting experience. Now, this has only happened once, and I've heard a lot of stories through the years, but I was working at a conference, and someone came up, and they said to me, you know what, my child was really struggling with reading, and he was like 10 years old. And we'd been through many Orton Gillingham-based programs. And he knew all of the phonograms, and he couldn't read. And she said, but then I bought Essentials, and I went through the pre-lessons. And in the pre-lessons, we had to do phonemic awareness, which was blending and segmenting words. And she said by the end of the pre-lessons, he was reading chapter books. Now, this is where I think this is very unusual, because he had learned all the phonograms and their sounds, but he had never made the connection that this is how words were formed, were those sounds recombined. So once he made that connection, he could apply that knowledge. This is a foundational skill. It's needed to be successful in reading. So phonemic awareness, again, is that foundational skill. And to become fluent in phonemic awareness, it means to master this skill. So if I say k, at, and the student goes, cat, are they fluent? No. But if I say t, a, b, ul, and the student says table, is that fluent? Yes. And the way we become fluent is through practice and through games. So I have a few of our pilot study research data. This is all preliminary data, but this is Kaleidoscope Charter School. And this was mid-year 2013, 2012-2013 school year for their DIBELS scores for phoneme segmentation. And this was the year before they implemented Logic of English. So it's pretty evenly distributed. This was the following year when they had implemented Foundations A in their kindergarten. They had more than 27 students in the 99th percentile across 3 sections of Logic of English. And we ran these scores over and over because we were like, surely we've done something wrong with this data. But no, this was their distribution after doing Foundations for half a year for phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is taught in Foundations, and in Foundations A, every lesson includes phonemic awareness. And then in Foundations B, there'll be phonemic awareness in some of the lessons, but they'll be focusing more and more on systematic phonics and vocabulary, and so you'll see that taper off as they master those skills. And then in Essentials, phonemic awareness is very heavily in the pre-lessons, and then there's more advanced phonemic awareness skills in this section called Exploring Sounds. And in that section, students will apply what they know about sounds to discover new spelling rules or how words work. So once again, these pre-lessons will have some foundational phonemic awareness skills, and then they'll build in the lessons. If you're interested in this graphic about phonemic awareness, if that's helpful to you, you can get that on our website, and there's a link in your training manual as well. We also have been putting together a phonemic awareness microsite. And on this microsite, so if you go to this web address, you will find a couple of things. One, you'll find a section where you can practice phonemic awareness skills. And then you will also find a list of all of the skills or standards for phonemic awareness. In addition, you'll find an assessment for each of those individual skills. So this is a project that we are working on, and this should be a wealth of resources for you on how to teach phonemic awareness and then how to also assess your students' skills with phonemic awareness. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
I was just going to comment when you were talking about the blending and the segmenting and how when we first started LOE in a 3rd grade classroom, we did the pre-assessment for essentials, or the placement test, I should say, or check. And I would say, 60% of those kids really struggled with the blending and the segmenting. And so the classroom teacher and I were thinking, well, how about we do this whole group, because they could all benefit from it. So she was finding times like at transition times, or just lining up for lunch or whatever, and she'll say, I spy a good flag, and the kids loved it, and so they started doing it in their specials classes too, and talking like that, and just making it a fun thing. And they all, within just a couple of weeks, could blend and segment all those same words that we had just checked them 2 weeks prior. So they can get it quickly.
Very quickly, and it's very interesting, and you can talk to Christy about this too with the summer reading camps in South Carolina. These were rising fourth graders who had been flagged for needing help with reading, and they were sent to a reading camp, or were able to participate in a reading camp. And it was only within a few days of intensive practice of these skills, and they were able to master segmenting and blending of even 3- and 4-syllable words. So older students can master this very quickly, but they need to be taught explicitly. Just because, we need to be explicitly taught that words are made of sounds and how to blend and segment them. Some children get it naturally, they just suddenly seem to know this, but that is not true for all students.
So do you think it's just curriculums are just void of that, like beginning programs that do not teach the segmenting? Do you think that's how so many children are like behind, and not to include language and all that stuff, but just like you said, how these children just pick it up? It's just because they just they didn't get it taught. It got skipped or something. Do you think that's...
Well, you guys have a lot of curriculum background in this room. Do you find that most curriculum teaches segmenting and blending very systematically, or do they often skip just to rhyming and then say we teach phonemic awareness? Yeah, I think they often skip to rhyming, identifying first and last letter sounds and medial sounds, but they skip these foundational phonemic awareness skills that are necessary.